Afternoon and welcome everyone to Crossriver Partnership's 14th LiveShare session, this time in collaboration with Parks for London for the launch of their Good Parks for London report, Parks and the Pandemic. I hope everyone's keeping well. So my name's Thomas Joyce, I work here at Crossriver Partnership. And before we make a start with today's session, there is a bit of housekeeping that I would like to mention. So this LiveShare session is being recorded and will be available to view online. Like always, we'll signpost you to a link for this at the end of the event. Also, I know you'll only be able to see that there's just one person watching. You might be thinking, is it only me? Please don't worry, you're not alone, and I can assure you that there is more than one person. It's also worth mentioning that we'd love for you to see our lovely faces, live and moving, but to ensure a smooth experience, we're going to keep to our headshots for the entirety of this session. Brilliant. And on the note of smooth experience, please do make sure that you've logged in via Google Chrome, as the LiveShare platform works best using this browser. Just a little bit of tech wizardry for you all as well. If you'd like to make the chat function at the bottom right-hand corner of your screens larger, just press the arrows on the top right-hand corner of both the attendee list and speaker list, which are on the right-hand side of your screens, to minimize them, making the chat function slightly bigger. And then after all of today's presentations, there will be a chance for you to have your say via a Q&A session. So Rachel Aldridge, a project officer here at Crossriver Partnership, will be moderating the chat facility, the one that you've all now hopefully made a little bigger. So if you do have any questions throughout the presentations, do post them in there, stating your name and where you're from. We will try our very best to answer all of your questions, but if we are unable to due to time constraints, then please do contact us via email and we'll get back to you with a response. All of our emails will be displayed at the very end of the session. So brilliant. So during today's LiveShare session then, we'll be joined by a number of experts from across the industry. These include Tony Leach, Chief Executive at Parks for London, Martin Kelly, Head of Planning at GL Hearn, Dr. Meredith Whitten, an ESRC postdoctoral fellow at the London School of Economics. And we also have our top scoring borough here today, and all will be revealed to who this is a little bit later on. And then also myself at Crossriver Partnership. As I've mentioned, we've also got Rachel Aldridge, a project officer, and Rachel will be moderating the chat facility to the right-hand side of your screens. We've also got Joshua West, our tech lead for the session. So any problems you have, post them in the chat and Josh will be able to get you sorted. So brilliant. So that's all from me. It now gives me great pleasure to hand you all over to Tony Leach. Tony is Chief Executive of Parks for London, and he'll be chairing the remainder of this event. So over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Good afternoon, everyone. Really good to virtually see you. And it's a shame we can't all meet face to face as we have in previous years, but at least we can meet this way. And I just give you a little overview of what we're planning to do in just an hour. And so we'll be hearing first from Martin Kelly, who is from GL Hearn, who's the company that sponsors the production of this report, for whom we're really very grateful. And then we have Dr. Meredith Whitten, who will be giving our keynote speech, followed by the announcement of the top scoring borough, and they will have a few words to say. And then I'll be rounding that off with a review of Parks and the Pandemic, what we've seen so far this year. And then at the end of that, there'll be an opportunity, well, not just at the end, during the whole session, you can post questions, and thankfully the team from the Crossriver Partnership will be collating those, and we'll round off with some questions. So as I said, all this will be wrapped up by 5 o'clock, and excuse me, and we hope that you'll get a lot out of today. So with no further delays, I want to welcome Martin Kelly, our sponsor from GL Hearn. Welcome, Martin.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Tony. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along. It's great to have everyone here for this important event. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to represent GL Hearn and its corporate body. and in support of the Good Parks for London report. This is a really important part of our agendas in terms of urban greening and social corporate responsibility. It's also in support and very much in tune with our mission statement and intention to create the communities people want to be part of. And I'm really pleased to say that this is our fourth consecutive year assisting with the production of this important report and initiative. I'm very conscious what a challenging year 2020's been for everyone, with COVID-19 pandemic disrupting our day, restricting the things we like to do and the people we want to spend time with, and of course changing also, quite importantly, the ways of, and therefore puts a greater emphasis on how we achieve our recreation. So this is a small a couple of years ago as part of our land planning team. It identifies and I think exemplifies how important this report is and serves as a testament to the incredible hard work and dedication of the people who maintain London's green spaces. This one is central London, but obviously there's a great range of important spaces elsewhere. Together, we can raise the bar and create the much needed parks and open spaces for people who live in and visit this great city of ours, and indeed the one that we love. For so many of us through the summer and now through this second lockdown in England, our local parks and open spaces have proved invaluable for a whole raft of activities, including health and well-being, contact with nature, and have acted as one of our most important assets in delivering some solace from a lot of the anxieties of the global pandemic. So here we are in Battersea Park now, slightly larger open space. This is one I actually worked on nearly 25 years ago on the original master plan when it was quite run down, and it's since then been rejuvenated and picked up a lot of heritage funding, which has enabled it to become a very important metropolitan space. The reason I show you this is that I'm lucky enough to live in the heart of London. I live in Pimlico, close to many of the royal parks. However, my local park is actually this one, Battersea Park. This is a regular place for me to visit in my weekly routine, and it's part of my health and well-being programme. And fortunately, I'm within walking distance. So in our work this year, GL Hearn has continued to advise clients on the importance of green spaces and the pivotal role they play in relation to the built environment around them. We've supported public and private sector clients to shape sustainable spaces for the future and to secure the right investment and planning decisions so that communities across the UK can all benefit, and not only in London. So I hope that you enjoyed this report as much as we've enjoyed helping to put it together, and will hopefully do so in the future. It's certainly been great fun working with the Good Parks of London team. They're very capable and very enthusiastic, and wish them well for the future. So I'd like to thank you at that point and hand back to Tony.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. I'm not going to delay him, and I'm going to hand over straight to Meredith, and she has been working with us for some time. And the research is on green space in London. And I'm going to hand over to her now. Over to you, Meredith. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank GL Hearn and Parks for London and everyone at Cross River Partnership for having me this afternoon. I've attended every one of the Good Parks for London report launches, so it's really quite the honor to be able to celebrate London's parks and green spaces again with you. Although, like everyone else, I wish we could be doing it in that fantastic venue and seeing each other in person. The photo you see here is of Valentine's Park. It's a flagship park in the borough of Redbridge. One reason I chose this photo to use is because it shows a fork in the road. And for me, this is a bit of a metaphor for parks and green spaces in London at this moment. There's been an incredible amount of attention on parks over the past year. Early in the pandemic and lockdown in March, one of the first topics mentioned at the government's daily briefings was parks and green spaces. We've seen attention on the role and the importance of green spaces skyrocket, and not just in London, but cities around the world. There's really global attention on the value of parks and green spaces. I've been researching green spaces since I was a postgraduate more than 20 years ago. And sometimes I feel like all I do is talk about green space, write about green space, and think about green space. But I don't think I've ever had as many conversations about green spaces with such a broad range of people as I've had in the past 9 months. And to me, that's a wonderful thing. But this renewed interest and attention in parks and green spaces is something we have to harness. And we're going to have to do that amidst dire economic conditions and amongst a crowded arena of other issues competing for attention and resources. So like this photo of Valentine's Park, I believe we're at a fork in the road. I didn't think it was possible for Londoners to be any more passionate about their parks. It doesn't matter if the grass is turned dry and yellow in the midst of record-breaking heat waves, or if green spaces are actually more of a muddy brown or a wintry white, or bursting with spring or autumn colors. Londoners love our green spaces year-round, and we've seen that to the extreme during the pandemic. But this doesn't come without a cost. This past year has highlighted the vital services and functions that green spaces provide for human health, but we can't forget the role green spaces can play in ecological health as well. Climate change hasn't stopped because of the pandemic, and we have to ensure green spaces continue to be managed for the vital environmental services they can provide. This can prove challenging when parks and their litter bins are crammed full. One thing that happened during the pandemic that fits with my research is an increased awareness of the importance of local spaces near where we live. During lockdown, we've been fairly limited to the green spaces within walking or cycling distance. So the recognition that there is a variety of spaces around us is important. And as a result, we've seen people appreciating their interactions with nature in a way that maybe they weren't so cognizant of before. For example, I've seen people in my neighborhood use small spaces for exercising or reading a book, when in the past, these were spaces they only walked through on the way to the shop. We are blessed to have such a legacy of fantastic, flagship, iconic spaces. We're fortunate to have the Royal Parks as international ambassadors for London's green spaces. But really, it's the broader network of nearly 3,000 spaces of different sizes and shapes, including those local spaces, that gives Londoners a green experience. So to me, the past year has emphasized the value of local spaces, the green spaces at our doorstep that we engage with most often. At the same time, the pandemic has highlighted areas where much work needs to be done. The Good Parks for London report is instrumental in this. It shows not only areas that need work within specific boroughs, but also what we need to do better across London. Foremost among this is the fact that not every Londoner has access to high-quality local spaces. Economically deprived neighborhoods and Black and minority ethnic residents have fewer accessible quality green spaces. Research shows that people who live in less green neighborhoods experience worse health outcomes, and not just during a pandemic. Lack of access to nature and green spaces contributes to disparities in long-term health and well-being, such as links to obesity, longevity, and mental health. So while some Londoners were expressing a renewed appreciation for nature in the past year, this rings a bit hollow when that experience is not available to all Londoners. And it's not just access to conventional large parks. There is unequal provision of a broad range of green elements. So some Londoners lack access to not only health benefits that come from the use of parks, but also from the ecosystem services like urban cooling, air filtration, and biodiversity that a range of green elements can provide. So one of the key actions that must come out of what we've learned this year is a more aggressive, urgent effort to remedy these disparities. The evaluation that Good Parks for London does can play a prominent role in identifying where and how we need to focus our efforts. In a way, I think all of the attention we're seeing on parks and green spaces causes a bit of caution because in the past decades, we've seen cyclical funding and underfunding. So you couldn't be blamed for being a bit cynical and thinking, okay, here we go again. Green spaces will get a lot of attention until something else comes around. But I hope what's changed is the recognition that green spaces aren't just a cosmetic afterthought, something that's nice to have or a discretionary item, that actually green spaces are just as essential as other types of infrastructure and services. They've definitely been a lifeline during the pandemic. What I believe is becoming more recognized is that green space shouldn't be delivered separately from other urban services. Green spaces aren't separate from health. They are greatly intertwined with it, both human and ecological health. But to reap these benefits for people and the planet, we must invest in our green spaces consistently. We have to dedicate resources, including time, skills, and funding. And this attention and care and investment has to be sustained. That's what I always take away from the Good Parks for London report. It's an opportunity to celebrate all of the impactful, innovative, and pioneering things that local authorities and other land managers do with green spaces. This report allows us to share ideas and best practices. It's also a way to highlight the breadth of benefits and services that London's diverse network of green spaces provide. But the Good Parks for London report also serves as a stark reminder of what Londoners stand to lose without sustained investment. Although the data for this year's report was collected before COVID-19, that just underscores that London's parks have been able to rise to the challenge presented during the pandemic because of the investment local authorities and other land managers and organizations make year in and year out. It's this constant investment and constant striving to improve green spaces that has enabled us as Londoners to rely on those spaces during a health crisis, a climate crisis, and just in everyday life. With green spaces facing an even more dire funding and resource situation as we deal with the economic fallout of the pandemic, we can't let the success overshadow the work that still needs to be done. Our parks and green spaces give so much to us as Londoners. We must make sure we give back to those spaces. We must commit to and hold decision makers accountable for investing adequately in green spaces so all Londoners benefit from good parks for years to come. Thank you again for having me, and I'll hand it back to Tony.
Thank you very much, Meredith. That was a very thought-provoking and challenging message. For those of you who've joined this meeting a bit late and missed the beginning, just be reassured that this is being recorded, so you'll be able to catch up later. So last year's Good Parks for London report focused on health and well-being. And in this exceptional year, we have not surprisingly focused on parks and the pandemic. As usual, part one compares 32 local boroughs in London against 10 criteria. And the second part of the report looks at other non-local authority parks providers across London and brings these all together in one place. This year, we've seen improvements in supporting nature, community involvement, skills development, and sustainability. And what's noticeable over the 4-year period is the great increase in the amount of collaboration that's going on, which is surely a good thing. This year, 90% of boroughs have improved their scores, and the range of the scores is narrowing. So I come to the moment that you've all been waiting for, really, which is to know what is the top performing borough. Well, here's the table that you all look for. And I'm pleased to say that Lambeth has gone to the top of the table as the top performing borough in 2020. And we're very, very pleased for them. And I'm going to now hand over to Councillor Sonia Winifred. She's the Cabinet Member for Equalities and Culture in the London Borough of Lambeth. And she's going to share a bit about what's been going on in Lambeth. So I'm very pleased to hand over to you, Sonia Winifred. Thank you. Whoops, that's me.
You with me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Hello. Thank you so much. We are delighted. We've all had to adapt to some unprecedented environment with COVID-19. Our parks and open spaces have never before been more important as they are now in our communities in supporting health and well-being. So it's really just to thank our staff, the hardworking and dedicated staff, our volunteers and stakeholder groups. But I would like to take the opportunity to also thank our Assistant Director for Neighbourhood and Environment and Street Care, which includes Parks and Leisure, Kevin Crook, who's been absolutely fantastic in taking our parks forward, and our Head of Parks and Leisure, Ian Ross. They've both been absolutely fantastic in all this work done. As you can see, we manage large green spaces, 135 green spaces, and covering 10% of our borough. And our services alongside, we brought our services in-house, and we've been dedicated working towards making it the success that it is. We have our stakeholder groups, 29 of them. We meet regularly for our Parks Forum. And this is also very much linked to our the Friends of the Earth report, which some of you will be aware of, where for the first time they mapped the availability of green spaces for people living across communities living across England. And Lambeth, we were one of the two lowest boroughs with least amount of green spaces for our population. So this was also connected very much so with the disproportionality, which highlighted certain communities and deprivation, and it's certainly it's something that we picked up on within our communities, and the use of our parks and the importance of having parks and green spaces available for our communities as we go forward. So in our Good Parks for London, our meeting those criteria is how we've taken our parks forward and improving our parks and green spaces, putting together a new biodiversity plan last year, and significantly increasing our parks management in taking our objectives forward. Our new pest management policy, which we discussed, I think last year, we had the meeting at our town hall to share how we're moving forward on those, and our continued increase in green flags, and we now have 18 green flags, very proud of that. And again, going back to our communities and volunteers, because they have been absolutely phenomenal in supporting us in taking this forward. Again, our big push in London in Bloom, 14 gold and silver gilts. And of course, we have in place now a 5-year strategy, and taking forward our commitment to supporting the council's manifesto pledge to be carbon neutral by 2030. We've now got 23% of our fleet is green, and 40% of handheld power tools are now electric. So we really are pushing forward in supporting the council's environment strategy. Also, our new events policy, which is based on the Parks for London, Good Parks for London template, And we've also developed our green events guide, which is important that all our applications for events do follow our guide on this. Again, going forward, more significantly, our improvements, which we've included, is our user survey, which we've not done before. So this is very much taking things forward and improving. As you can see, 453 face-to-face surveys. We have 98% of our users satisfied with our parks, 97 satisfied with the horticulture. Again, it's bringing communities together, working together. 96% satisfied with safety and security, 95% satisfied with cleanliness, and that was a task, because I'm sure as all other parks were aware with the lockdown, the heavy increase in litter, which we needed to put procedures, measures in place to tackle, which we have done. But only 53% satisfied with our toilets. Again, this became a very specific issue within our parks, again, due to lockdown with the heavy usage of our parks, and where we've known that toilets aren't satisfactory, but we did have to bring in about 85 portaloos across our borough during the demand through lockdown. So we're very aware this is something we need to work on. And again, our capital investment plan for the next 5 years, as you can see, 27 million of proposed projects over 56 sites. 13 million will be allocated corporately, and our 9 million external funding that will come from our external applications, contracts, sports, and other external contracts, and the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Our new social fund offers potential. This is a new project, if I can call it that the council is taking forward, where any new contracts within the borough, well, there will be a 1% levy, which will go into a communal pot, and we can then bid for that social funding in order to take things forward in our parks, and a focus on our existing infrastructure, making our parks as helpful and as safe for everyone. I would just like to add that we're all winners here, because we've all had to adapt so significantly to meet the needs of our communities and to support them. And so I thank you all so much for this accolade, this award, because we have worked extremely hard under extreme circumstances. And so well, I just want to say a big thank you so much on behalf of Lambeth, and we accept this, and we will continue to work as hard as possible with our communities in making our parks the place that it should be for all our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much for sharing what Lambeth has been up to and its plans for the future. And again, congratulations for being the top scoring borough this year. I must say there are other boroughs very close behind you. Not that it's all about winning. As you said quite rightly, we are all winners in this, in the sense that, as I said before, over 90% of boroughs have improved their scores since last year, which is great. Well, what a year it's been, and it's not over. Normally we would be having this event in a face-to-face fashion, usually in October, but this has been delayed because everyone's been so busy keeping our parks open. And we almost ran out of time to get this published before the end of the year, but we have, and we're glad to be sharing it with you. As the pandemic took hold in the UK in April, the government boldly announced that people need parks. and that parks must stay open. Just about everyone has ventured into their parks and green spaces. Many have revisited old haunts, and some have discovered new places. Through our website, we've been regularly updating the changing guidance to support land managers. And parks managers have been producing lots of signage to try and convert that guidance into clear, understandable messages. And they've been opening and closing some of the facilities as rules have changed over time. It's been relentless and never ending. We've come to accept that most events have been cancelled and are unlikely to return for a while. This includes many sports activities and seasonal events like Bonfire Night and and Winter Wonderland. Even our cafes have become adapted and to become takeaways. But a consequence of all these changes is that park services are facing considerable financial losses. The combined effects of good weather and the ending of lockdown 1 has meant that people have flocked to parks. We have examples in Epping Forest where they have counters that the increase has been as high as over 300% increase in use. And in some smaller areas within Epping Forest, it's over 500% increase. It's phenomenal. Prevented from access to indoor facilities, people have been using every conceivable outdoor space. Dog ownership has increased. Indoor activities have moved outside. And picnics have become more prevalent and sophisticated. Sadly, the desire for outdoor music events has led to illegal raves in some places. And the environmental and financial cost to clear up has been huge. Litter volumes have increased by as much as 8 times the normal amount, not to mention an increase in fly tipping as well. Restrictions in hospitality have led to an increase in takeaway deliveries being literally driven into the heart of many spaces and leaving litter behind. As staff struggled to provide COVID-safe facilities, we saw some parks abused by a thoughtless minority. However, through the relentless hard work of frontline and back office staff, our parks have remained open and free to use. And I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's been part of that. And that includes all the many volunteers, be it through friends groups or community residents groups, who've all mucked in and helped by volunteering. In Ealing, their litter action group has grown from 200 to nearly 900 volunteers during the pandemic. And we want to say thank you to all of them. Now, unlike the graphs you've been seeing about COVID infections, this graph, thanks to David Brown, shows us the net revenue expenditure in London's parks over the last 12 years. So it's the net revenue expenditure. Yes, we all know it's a downward trend. Now, this expenditure accounts for between only 0.25 and 1.6% of the total revenue budget for all council services. It's a tiny investment for incredible outcomes. And over the last 12 years, we've seen revenue budget cuts. But on top of that, we've seen this year additional costs for litter clearance, cleansing, temporary fencing, signage, plus many parks have lost income from events, fees and charges and concessions. And these losses range from hundreds of thousands across to millions. And now we're facing potential further cuts. The Good Parks for London report is part of our armoury to make the case for protecting revenue budgets and capital investment to keep parks in good shape. Please use it with us to help get that message across to decision makers. And that also includes using today's recorded event. Please use it and share it. A glimmer of hope came in August when the London Green Spaces Commission published its report and proposed that Parks for London become a centre for excellence, which means that we'll have greater engagements with the Greater London Authority, London councils, LEDNet, CLOA and others to increase and expand our effectiveness and to embed parks as part of London's green recovery. Good Parks for London is not about winners and losers. As I said before, over 90% of scores have improved. Good Parks for London is our chance to recognise this great work and to say thank you. So congratulations to all boroughs and other land managers for delivering good services in such hard times. We've always known that people need parks. But parks need funding that is sustained. So let us keep pushing this message as we move out of lockdown 2 and face an uncertain future. Thank you for listening. And now I'm going to hand over to Thomas, who I think is fielding our questions and answers.
Yes, well, excellent. Thank you very much, Tony. Might I add, there's been some extremely interesting presentations and a huge congratulations to the London Borough of Lambeth. I know everyone on the call today must have been on tenterhooks waiting to see who the winner was. Well, we do have, well, we're very good on time, actually. So let's open up the floor to any questions. I know that a few of you have been posting them in the chat. I was wondering, Tony, whether first of all we could start with you. We did have a query. Just would you be able to maybe expand on what revenue expenditure was? That was just on the graph on slide 43. I can bring that back up for you if you'd like.
Yes, please. So, okay. So this is for 28 of the 32 boroughs. Partly because not all boroughs have submitted returns for the most recent 2019-20 figures. So we could only give it for 28 boroughs. But essentially that is all put all together, all the revenue expenditure by those 28 boroughs over that period along the bottom. It's hard to see probably on the screen from 2008 up to 2019-20, and you can see as we all know and we've experienced cuts year on year. What is interesting is that last year it showed a turning point. Now there are lots of, this raises lots of questions, and one of those is, why is this? Is this that local authorities are realizing that they cannot afford to carry out any further cuts on their park services, and they're now beginning to invest in them? I'd like to think that is the case, and I hope that is. My worry is that going forward from this year into next year, we're going to face, as all council services are facing, huge challenges. Whether that curve will go up, stay the same, or go down. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think this is exactly why we need to use the information in the Good Parks for London report to say, look, London's park services are good and they need to be protected. We cannot afford to cut them further.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Tony, for giving that explanation there. I'll just pop us back to our question slide then. So yes, thank you, Tony. Maybe a question this time for Councillor Winifred. So Peter O'Connell loves your passion for parks, and yes, I have to agree with Peter there. How have you been able to protect parks budgets, Councillor Winifred, versus a decade of relentless cost cutting?
Thank you. I'm just unmuting. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yes. So as with all authorities, we are in very strange times with COVID, and certainly as we've seen boroughs like Croydon in dire situations. But in Lambeth, I think that we've been a bit more frugal, dare I say it. But so we are, whilst we do worry, there are concerns around the budget, we have recognized the benefits and the necessity of our parks and open spaces. Like I said earlier on in my presentation, what COVID has done is certainly highlighted where much of this health and well-being is needed, and our parks have certainly been there for our communities, those who don't have access to those green spaces. And I think just by myself and others within the council, within the cabinet, recognizing that this is so important. So we've been able to protect and agree our parks budget going forward, and to look at the budgets we have put forward for parks, that they remain sustainable and that we continue to deliver this much needed healthy environment for our communities. And as I said, with the report from Friends of the Earth, just goes to show that London, certainly in Lambeth, that we need to do as much as possible to protect the green space that we have.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Councillor Winifred. Maybe another question then for Tony, and do feel free to add anything, any other speakers, Councillor Winifred, Meredith and Martin. So the first question then, we're going to put two in one. So we've got one from Susanna Wilkes, so thank you, Susanna. And Susanna's asking whether you'd be able to talk a little bit more about the benefits, well, how the benefits of parks are quantified and measured, and whether these scores are comparable over time. So looking at last year's scoring criteria, is it the same? And maybe kick off with Tony, and if Meredith, Martin and Councillor Winifred would like to add anything, then please do.
Okay, good question. Essentially, the 10 criteria that we look at for every borough hasn't changed over the 4 years. What has happened is that, and so it's actually fairly consistent, apart from the first year, which was more of a pilot to try out whether it would work. So the last 3 years are pretty consistent. All we've done is actually added more granularity to the 10 headings. And by doing that, it makes year-on-year comparison easier. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, I'll just read out what the 10 criteria are that we look at. So the first is public satisfaction, and that's vital that boroughs are asking the public if they're happy with the levels of service. The second is awards for quality, and we take the proxies of the Green Flag Award and London in Bloom scores. Now, not all boroughs compete in those award programmes. So boroughs that don't score so well in those are sometimes not because their quality of their parks isn't good, but it's simply because they've chosen not to participate in those awards. But those are the best proxies that we have to measure quality. The next is collaboration, where we compare how boroughs work within their own organisations, with other organisations, with like the third sector, and also with their neighbours as well and other boroughs. The fourth is about events, and that's to do with breadth and scope of different size, different types of events. The next is health, fitness and well-being, which is looking at what boroughs are doing to use their parks to improve health and well-being of their residents. This year we included a small fraction of points for those boroughs that are using the Health Parks Toolkit to do health audits. And we also ask about social prescribing and other things. I'm going over this very quickly, otherwise I'll be here all night and I'll put you all to sleep. The next one is supporting nature, which is finding out whether they have an up-to-date BAP, Biodiversity Action Plan, what they're doing to involve communities in that nature care and concern. The next is community involvement, which is about does it have friends groups? Does it have a friends group network? Do they meet independently? Does the borough support the friends groups either financially or with other resources? The next is skills development, and we look at every level of skill from the basic lower skill apprenticeships all the way up to senior management. The sustainability is looking at, are they trying to reduce their carbon footprint, moving towards battery operated equipment, handheld equipment? Is their fleet using IT that keeps their journeys as short as possible, that they're moving away from carbon fuels? And the last one, perhaps the most important, is about strategic planning. Do they have a longer term strategic plan for their green infrastructure, for their parks and open spaces? And do they, associated with that, have an up-to-date action plan? And do they have an asset management plan so that they're managing what they've got well? So that is a race through the 10 criteria. That we haven't changed the criteria much. Year on year for the last 3 years is fair. Was there another part to that question that I've missed?
I think you've covered it there, Tony.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, it was just also looking to see whether the scoring card then, as we might be able to call it, was the same over the years.
Yeah,
we can compare from year to year. But yes, brilliant. Thank you very much, Tony. I'm not sure whether any of the other speakers would like to make a comment at all. Please do.
Yeah, can I make a comment? Here, and just to say, well, obviously we score top on all those, don't we? We certainly meet those criteria. I mean, looking at the green issues, 93% of our fleet's green. We've certainly learned over the years, and I think Tony will agree, about our development and putting things in place, bringing the service in-house, our biodiversity plan, our new events policy, a guide, based on the Parks for London template. So we've been very, very robust. And our friends groups, our volunteers, just working together. And I do feel that certainly those Green Flag Awards, 18, and our London in Bloom entries wouldn't be possible without those volunteers. So I think it is really about the council working with the community and developing those healthy green spaces. And of course, our health parks, which we have got, and this is part of our manifesto pledges to deliver in our health parks, and we've been doing that, and we want to continue this going forward, because it's certainly proved beneficial, and it's healthy. It's good for the council to be working in partnership with the community, and I feel very, very proud of that. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I just add that one of what we've discovered is that the impact of the Good Parks reports is acting as a nudge tool to get boroughs to begin to look at what they do carefully and to talk more to each other and learn from each other. So that in terms, somebody, I think it's Tony Burton, asked the question how we can get boroughs who are lower scoring to improve their scores. Well, what's been happening, and Lambeth is an example of that. Even though they've over the years they've scored well, they are always looking out to see how they can improve, and they've been looking and actually it's not just the top scoring boroughs, but all the boroughs have been looking to see what they can learn from each other. And this collaboration I referred to when I spoke is a phenomenally powerful tool that, you know, we've got 33, well, just in terms of the boroughs plus all the others, 33 organizations doing similar work, now beginning to collaborate with each other and do things and save each other huge amounts of money from in terms of reinventing the wheel. They're sharing their learning and helping each other to pull their socks up. And it's such an encouraging thing to see. So, you know, I make myself available, if it hasn't been made clear to you, I'm available to come and meet with people, particularly with those in the boroughs, to see what areas we can help with, and we can put you in touch with others who are doing well in an area, and what they're doing they can share with you.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Tony said from a research perspective. One of the things that I'm looking at is how we think about green space in a more strategic way across all of London. And so those collaborations and those kind of common issues really come into that. Are there things, whether it's you know, the printing of signs as Richard asked, or you know, more strategic planning that could take place or that is starting to take place kind of organically, and especially when we're trying to address, you know, broader issues like climate change and public health issues that really kind of blur boundaries. So the Good Parks for London report and the data in it is really valuable for that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So yes, we've been having a flurry of questions coming into the chat. Jamie Smith has mentioned, and well, thank you for your question, Jamie. And Jamie's just wondering whether the Good Parks for London report refers to APSE data submissions to compare performance improvements and so on. Yes, maybe Tony, would you be best placed to answer?
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to hog this. APSE data, we do not include APSE data. That's done separately. That's an organisation that gathers benchmarks all council services, not just parks, across I think the 4 nations actually. So some London boroughs are members of that, but we don't incorporate APSE data. What we always do is, you know, we'll be the first to put our hands up and say the Good Parks for London is not perfect, and we're always ourselves looking to improve. And particularly now, as we've been challenged to become a centre for excellence with no get out. And so what we're keen to do is to improve what we do, and every year we ask for feedback, and we're asking you here now to give us feedback about how we can improve what we collect and how we share that data as well. At the same time too, we don't want to make this such an onerous task that local authorities spend, you know, inordinate amounts of time gathering data and information. It needs to be proportionate.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tony. Yeah, so do keep your questions coming into the chat box. I can see that we've got a few people typing. Yes, so Peter O'Connell has asked a very good question, actually. Does anyone have any examples of where greener measures have saved money? I'm not sure, Meredith or Martin, whether either of you would like to comment on this. And if not, please feel free, Councillor Winifred and Tony, as well.
I can just come in briefly on that one. There's more and more empirical evidence nowadays about the value and benefit of green infrastructure, which obviously includes parks and open spaces. And it's gathered together as part of the agenda for environmental sustainability. It's particularly true of the tree population as well, and how it improves, not only provides urban greening, but amelioration of the urban heat island effect, increases values in property levels, increases biodiversity, assists in air pollution. And that often includes a value now that's specifically attached to it. So the answer is yes. I think there is information now of a more, as I say, empirical nature coming forward, but inevitably there needs to be more, because the principal issue here, it seems to me, is the lack of ongoing funding and revenue. And if you can prove the value of our parks and spaces, I think that might encourage the government cascading down into local planning authorities and into boroughs. It's noticeable just very quickly that in the MHCLG's proposed revisions to the Planning Act, there's not a lot of reference to the parks and spaces in there, unfortunately. But what there is a proposal infrastructure levy being widened, which I think will give the ability for boroughs to spend more, and hopefully some of this infrastructure levy will be cascaded down and apportioned to the upkeep of parks, and I think that will be of assistance. Thank you.
I have much more to add to that, although I was thinking how do we measure the impact on health? How do we put a price on that? And I think we're seeing more and more in Lambeth that the more we up the upkeep of our parks, the more our residents are using the parks, and again the more user satisfaction survey. And certainly, again, going back to the budget, this is one of the reasons why we've maintained our parks budget, and to ensure of its sustainability going forward. But I think more and more the green spaces, the value of green spaces is increasing across the country. So as we move forward, I'm sure there will be more areas, more ways of measuring that. But for now, I think it's just seeing and taking forward the benefits that we see within the community, and so certainly the health benefits going forward. That's something I think we need to look more into, and I think we will do as we continue, looking deeper into our parks and open spaces. Thanks.
Brilliant. Yes, well, thank you very much, everyone. I know that we are now very much, well, we're very short on time. We've got a minute left. I can see that there is a question from Alice Roberts that we have unanswered. Alice, we will take this question away with us, and we will provide you with our comments on that. So please don't worry, and apologies that we have run out of time to answer it. But yes, so thank you very much, everyone. And I would just like to take this opportunity to again thank all of our speakers for the brilliant talks today, and also congratulations to all of those involved in the launch of the Parks for London report. Tony, please do correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the link for this is now live for everyone to read.
Yes.
Brilliant. And also a huge congratulations to Lambeth as well as the top scoring borough.
Thank you.
I think some extremely valid points have been discussed today regarding the importance of our parks and open spaces, looking at how these places transformed into sanctuaries and areas of tranquility for many to escape to during this pandemic. If anything, COVID-19 has showed us how valuable these spaces are and how important it is for us to maintain and respect these treasured areas dotted across our city, ensuring they're safe, unrestricted spaces for all that are free of charge and celebrate the rich history and diversity our London communities have to offer. So before we do then finish, addition to thanking all of our speakers, Parks for London, GL Hearn, the London School of Economics and the London Borough of Lambeth, CRP would also like to thank its major funders for making this live share possible, central government units DEFRA and Innovate UK's Challenge Fund, as well as the Mayor of London. We're currently working on a range of projects delivered which are on your screens now, from our Healthy Streets Every Day programme working across 17 London boroughs to allocate more streets-based walking and cycling, and to our Clean Air Villages project supporting hospitals, businesses and communities to help keep London's air clean. Well, finally then, before you all leave to go back the rest of your afternoons or now evenings, I would like to remind you all to sign up to our newsletter and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to receive all of our latest updates here across your partnership and also at Parks for London. This live share, past live shares and all of our future live shares will be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you have had any issues with the sound, which I saw at the beginning, please do pop onto our YouTube channel and you should be able to watch it all there free of any disruptions. And yes, like I mentioned, any questions you have, as always, do not hesitate to get in contact with any one of us. Our contact details are on your screens now. And again, thank you to all of our speakers for your talks today. And a big thank you to all of you, our attendees, for tuning in and joining us this afternoon. Remember to stay safe and see you all again very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.